In this lesson, we are going to learn how to solve a quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula. So in cases like when the quadratic is not factorable, the easiest formula to use is the quadratic formula. Of course, we do have other methods that we are able to use, but the quadratic formula is a pretty handy formula that works with any type of quadratics. Okay, now the quadratic formula looks like this. And this is based on the standard form of a quadratic. So when the quadratic equation is in the standard form, we are able to determine what the a, b, and c are. And those are the values that we substitute into this formula. Now, you want to be very organized with your formula. You can easily make a negative mistake, especially with this negative right here. And many students usually forget the negative in the outside. So you want to be careful. Now let's see a few examples that we can use, that we're going to use using the quadratic formula. So if you notice, this is in the standard form of a quadratic. So the first thing I need to do is determine what A is, what B, and C. So the coefficient of A is 1. The coefficient of B, or the second term, which is B, is 11. And C is negative 12. Now I'm going to substitute it into my formula. And my recommendation to you is every time you are doing a problem like this, to rewrite the formula. That way you memorize it and it's easier for you. Okay, so now I'm just going to substitute. So B is negative 11 over here, plus or minus the square root of 11 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 12. All divisible by 2 times 1. Okay, so 11 squared is 121. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 12 gives you negative 40. Positive 48. Sorry, positive 48. So plus 48. Okay, over 2 times 1 is 2. So then I have 121 plus 48 gives me 169. Square root of 169 divided by 2. Now I can simplify this a little bit more and say negative 11 plus or minus square root of 169 is 13 over 2. Now here I have two parts, the negative and the positive. Okay, so negative 11 plus 13 gives you gives you positive 2, right? Divided by 2 gives you 1. And then negative 11 plus minus 13 gives you negative 24. Divided by 2 gives you negative 12. Running out of space here. Okay. So, this is one of the answers, and this is the second answer. You're supposed to get two answers because of the plus or minus. Don't forget that. Okay, so in this example, we use a quadratic formula, which is this one, to solve it. Let's see one more example. Okay, we're supposed to use a quadratic formula to solve this. Now, it has to be in standard form of a quadratic. It has to be in standard form of quadratic, meaning it has to equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead, first rewrite it. And then I'm going to minus the 5 to set it equal to 0. Okay. Now I need to identify what my A, B, and C are. So A is 2, B is negative 3, and C is negative 5. Again, just to review and make sure I practice as much as possible, I'm going to, I don't know why that keeps happening. I'm going to write my quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2 times a. I'm going to go ahead and substitute my values. So that gives me negative times a negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a, which is 2. X equals, let's simplify. A negative times a negative is your positive 3 plus or minus square root of negative 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times 2 gives you negative a times negative 5 gives you 40. Positive 40 over 4. X equals 3 plus or minus. So this is 49 over 4. Square root of 49 is 7 over 4. So from here is where we split into two things. The 3 plus 7 over 4 and the 3 minus 7 over 4. 3 plus 7 is 10 over 4. And 3 minus 7 is negative 4 over 4. So this simplifies to 5 over 2, and this simplifies to negative 1. Ooh, I don't have space. So x equals 5 over 2 and negative 1. Very tiny little space. I need to write smaller. Don't you think? I think so. Oop. Those are my two answers. Let's see if we have one more example. Yep, we have one more example. Okay, again, we need to solve this using the quadratic formula, and we want to make sure it's in the standard form of a quadratic. As you can see, this is not in the standard form of a quadratic. So the first thing we need to do is to rewrite it in the standard form of a quadratic. So we're going to start by distributing this x. So this gives me negative x squared plus 6x equals 11. Then I'm going to go ahead and minus 11. This keeps happening. Okay. I think it's how I put my hand in the screen. Negative x squared plus 6x minus 11 equals 0. Now I need to identify my A, B, and C. A is negative 1, B is 6, and C is negative 11. Again, as an excellent way of reviewing, to rewrite the formula as many times as possible. So I will be rewriting it every time I use it. Practice. So then this is x equals negative 6 plus or minus square root of 6 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times c is negative 11. All over 2 times negative 1. X equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. 6 squared is 36. So then I have negative 4 times negative 1 gives me positive 4. Times negative 11 gives me negative 44. Okay. Divided by 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2. So then I have to simplify inside. So this is negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 44. Isn't that 8? Negative 36 minus 44 gives me a negative 8 divided by negative 2. So then I'm going to go ahead and say, if you remember, when we have a negative square root, I can break this into square root of 4 times the square root of, well, I can break it up into 3 things actually. But let's first can say square root of negative a. Knowing that I have a negative inside the square root, I know I'm going to have to bring out the I, because if I break this into square root of a times square root of negative 1, I know that the square root of negative 1 is I. So that I know. Now a is not a perfect square, so I'm going to break it into 4 times 2. So square root of 4 is 2. The I comes down, and I'm left with 2 inside the radical. So that's what the radical simplifies to. So then I have x equals negative 6 plus or minus 2i square root of 2 over negative 2. You can simplify this a little bit more with the negatives. That way the denominator is not a negative. You could also just leave it to this. But let's see how that looks. So I have negative 6 plus or minus 2i square root of 2 over negative 2. So again, this is two answers. So 6, well, let's write it in different colors. The positive and the negative. Okay. So they're both divisible by 2, which is great. So negative 6, I can rewrite this like this. So this reduced to 3 plus, actually minus, sorry. 3 minus I square root of 2. That it's one of the answers. And then here, I'm going to rewrite it like this. So this is going to be 3 plus I square root of 2. And there are your two answers. A little bit more simplified.